This is Tim O'Brien from Seattle on November 7th, 2025. And first, the news. Security researcher Troy Hunt of Have I Been Pwned has processed a massive dataset of 2 billion unique email addresses and 1.3 billion passwords, 625 million of which are new to the service Have I Been Pwned. And if you haven't heard of Have I Been Pwned, you should go check it out. It's a website, and you can see the links in the show notes. And you can register, and it'll tell you, have you been pwned? And by that, it'll tell you, has your email address been compromised? Has your password been compromised? Everyone should really be using this service. So you can learn more at troyhunt.com or also Have I Been Pwned. But in Hunt's analysis, he found 32 million distinct email domains, and about 20%, 394 million, were Gmail addresses. He wanted to be clear on his website that 80% of the data has nothing to do with Gmail, to dispel any misconception that this was a Gmail hack. This was not. He verified the data by contacting Have I Been Pwned subscribers. Multiple people recognized old passwords, some from 10 years ago, but a few people confirmed that some of these exposed passwords were still actively in use across several accounts. So this underscores the risk of password reuse. Troy Hunt also talked about the challenge computationally of processing 2 billion hacked emails and passwords. He had to scale up Azure SQL Hyperscale instance, that's 80 virtual CPUs, just to process this for 2 weeks, and even really simple operations like hashing all the emails that had to be reworked in batches to avoid crashing SQL. He had to notify 2.9 million subscribers, and he said that that was even a challenge. He had to slow down delivery so as not to trigger spam filters and rate limits. The pwned password repository grew significantly. Hunt notes that the new hashes increased the average hash range size by 50%, boosting API response sizes from 26 kilobytes to 40 kilobytes. So all these specifics align with Troy Hunt's official account. You can read more about that on troyhunt.com, and I would encourage everyone to sign up for Have I Been Pwned. Today's programming story is about Meta open sourcing a tool named Firefly. This is a new Python static type checker written in Rust, and it replaces their OCaml-based Pyre checker for Instagram's codebase. Firefly is dramatically faster, up to 40 times faster than MyPy on a large project, and this is thanks to Rust's performance and parallelism. It can type check million-line codebases in seconds. Meta cites 1.8 million lines per second throughput, and this means that they can do type checking on all of Instagram's codebase in 13 seconds versus over 100 seconds with the old Pyre. It supports standard Python type annotations, PEP 484. It reportedly requires no code changes to adopt. Just drop it into your existing type hints and MyPy configurations. Meta is already using Firefly in production on Instagram's massive Python codebase. So they announced Firefly in May 2025. It's still in alpha, but it's usable. It's implemented in Rust. And this is a theme that we've seen on other news stories in this podcast. Many Python tools are starting to use Rust for both speed and performance. There's also another advantage. By ditching Python for the type checker's implementation, Firefly can fully utilize multi-core parallelism. There's no global interpreter lock. It's a more efficient use of memory as well. So again, this is a report from InfoQ. If you want to learn more about Firefly, I would encourage you to go to the show notes for a link to InfoQ. But this is more of what you would expect from Meta. Meta has always had a habit of pushing the limits of the size of projects and finding ways to work around. They were using Git at first. They reached a limit with their monorepo. Then they invested in Mercurial. In this case, they're taking static type checking in Python to its limits, and they're investing in open source to create better solutions. And it's not unlike Microsoft's Pyrite, which does the same thing, which they've compared Firefly to in terms of speed. Firefly can check the PyTorch project in 2.4 seconds compared to 35.2 seconds for Microsoft's Pyrite. And today's Weird Bucket story is about the Farmers Almanac. After 207 years of continuous publication, since 1818, the Farmers Almanac has announced that its 2026 edition will be the last. This effectively shuts down a historic publication. The Almanac's editors posted a farewell note expressing pride in their legacy of, quote, weather, wit, and wisdom. They've urged readers to keep the folk traditions alive, quote, plant your peas when the daffodils bloom, and check the red sky at night. I don't know what that means. I'm not a farmer. No specific reason was given for the closure, but presumably the rise of instant weather apps and modern forecasts diminished its market. The website will remain online through December 2025. And culturally, the Farmers Almanac has been an American staple. I remember we had a copy when I was a kid, but we weren't farmers. We lived just outside of Boston. I always found it to be a little bit weird because it was highly inaccurate. Multiple studies and expert evaluations have indeed found that the long-term forecasts perform no better than chance. And a 2010 University of Illinois study commonly cited found the almanac's weather predictions were 50 to 50% accurate. Basically a coin toss. Popular Mechanics reported that the old Farmers Almanac and Farmers Almanac claim an 80% accuracy. But this University of Illinois study pegged it at 52. In other words, you can flip a coin and do just as well predicting colder versus warmer, or snowy versus dry for a given month. It's very clear that this was pseudoscience. The almanac's, quote, secret formula was devised by Robert B. Thomas in the 1790s, and it was said to incorporate sunspot cycles, tidal patterns, and planetary positions. Factors one might associate with astrological or tidal influences rather than modern meteorology. The almanac has never revealed the full formula, so it can't be peer-reviewed. As a result, scientists largely consider its forecast unscientific. I'll call it astrology dressed up as meteorology. But it does have an odd cultural significance. For 200 years, it provided rural communities guidance on when to plant crops. It was using moon phase calendars, when to fish, and even quirky best day schedules for household tasks. It included best days for when to wean children or potty train. And that was all based on the moon's signs. Many people bought it for gardening tips, astronomical tables, humor, and nostalgic wisdom. So if you're missing the Farmer's Almanac and you don't know when to plant your crops, I would encourage you to go look at the National Weather Foundation. Hopefully, they're still operating during the shutdown. And there's more security news this morning. AMD confirmed a high-severity security vulnerability affecting all Zen 5 architecture chips. That's the Ryzen 9000, the new Threadrippers, the EPYC Turin servers. The bug, tracked as AMD-SB-70555 and CVE-2025-62626. It causes the CPU's hardware's random number generator instruction, RDSEED, to sometimes return 0 while incorrectly signaling success. Essentially, under certain conditions, the RNG outputs predictable values, zeros, instead of random bits. And this is catastrophic for cryptography. It could make generated keys or nonce values completely predictable. Attackers might force a victim's CPU into this flawed state by putting it under specific stress, and then easily crack encryption that relies on the RDSEED for entropy. AMD released microcode fixes, but users need to update both their BIOS and firmware. Linux quickly disabled RDSEED on Zen 5 pending a fix, and Windows updates are rolling out. Now, if you've listened to this podcast, we reported on Tfail earlier this week. That's a trusted enclave problem that's also related to predictable randomness or a lack of entropy. This is completely unrelated. This RDC flaw is logic in a random number generator, and it impacts only Zen 5 chips via normal software use. So Tfail is not the same thing as this vulnerability with RDC. Now, if you're wondering if you're affected, this is all Zen 5 based CPUs. This includes the Ryzen 9040, 9050, all Zen 5 Threadrippers Pro. There's a bunch of different EPYC chips as well that are affected. Basically, if you're running an AMD chip today, I would update your OS and I would look to the AMD site for guidance as what to do next. And there is a trigger. There's some stress condition that can trigger this output. The engineer that found it posted his findings on a Linux kernel mailing list in mid-October 25, and that's when the Linux maintainers took action. There's a Linux patch that disables RDSEED on all Zen 5 CPUs. Microsoft is also expected to deploy firmware updates via Windows Update in coordination with AMD. But again, if you think you're affected, go look at the show notes for links to the appropriate resources. And again, this is another theme, randomness. When it's not really random, that's a problem for cryptography. And we have another news story this morning as well. Nvidia's new Blackwell Ultra GPU platform, the HGX B300 series, is launching in Q2 and Q3 of 2025 now. It delivers a massive leap in AI inference performance by introducing 4-bit floating point precision. Now, before I report this story, I just want to warn you, there's so many acronyms whenever you talk about GPUs, especially from Nvidia, it can get overwhelming. I'm not going to stop to explain them all, but I'll give it a try. An HGX B300 NVL16 server essentially has 8 Blackwell Ultra SXM GPUs, and that provides 144 petaflops of FP4 throughput and 2.1 terabytes of high bandwidth memory. Now let me boil that down and compare it to its predecessor. That's 11 times faster than large language model inference on the previous generation H100, the Hopper 100, which only went down to FP8. Blackwell is Nvidia's first architecture to support FP4 math, using a custom 4-bit format, an NVFP4 with 1 sign bit, 2 exponent bits, and 1 mantissa bit. Now, a lot of news stories that cover this are just going to say, oh look, 4-bit floating point. As a programmer, I hear that and I'm like, what do you mean 4 bits? What kind of number can you represent with 4 bits? And it even has a breakdown. If you listen to the previous section, it was 1 sign bit, 2 exponent bits, and 1 mantissa bit. So a lot of you might also be asking, what's a mantissa? It's a significand. Historically, the IEEE 754 term, and that's the floating point standard, it's the digits, right? It's where you specify what the digits are in your number. So if you look at a 4-bit floating point number, it really only can represent a number from -6 to 6. And if you are thinking about distinct numbers, it actually can't do a range. I think it has a specific set of values that can be represented, like 0.5, 1, 1.5, 2, 3, 4, 6. So this is not a floating point number like you're used to. It's not like you have a decimal and can just represent anything. But what they've found in large language models is if they reduce the number of bits they need to represent values in these models, they need less hardware. And the H100 only went down to FP8. So if you want more information about FP4, and I explained it for people who don't have any background, but if you have some background in floating point numbers, I'd encourage you to look at the links in the show notes. But this FP4 change is a big deal. And by leveraging FP4, Blackwell GPUs can pack 4 times more model parameters into memory bandwidth compared to FP16, which was using 16 bits, with minimal accuracy loss. Nvidia claims near identical LLM results versus FP8. And what's interesting is this focus on ultra-low precision FP4 is driven by industry-wide pressure to overcome memory bottlenecks for giant AI models. It's not any single competitor, but there's been models out there that have used less hardware and had more efficient results. So this Blackwell change is one of the reactions to that. The story mentions that Microsoft has already deployed a supercomputer-scale Blackwell cluster of GB300 NVL72s with 72 Blackwell GPUs per rack. It's reported that they've connected 64 of these racks together as a supercomputer-scale cluster. These are GB300 NVL72s, and they've achieved a 92.1 exaflop with FP4 inference performance as the unified accelerator. This huge cluster built on Azure, presumably for OpenAI, demonstrates Blackwell's ability to enable new frontiers: real-time AI reasoning, agentic AI, complex multi-step planning, as well as robotics applications requiring split-second inference. In summary, the Blackwell B300 platform's 7x compute and 4x memory increase over Hopper, coupled with this FP4 precision, are going to make the next models a little bit more of a jump than we got between GPT-4 and GPT-5. Now, the other thing that you should know about this FP4 change is that it's going to enable faster throughput, faster speed, and this potentially makes things like autonomous vehicle vision, real-time AI assistance more viable. And memory bandwidth has become the bottleneck for giant models. So being able to cram 4 times more data through the same bandwidth is a game changer. And Nvidia explicitly states that NVFP4 was introduced to enable those larger models to have higher throughput without hitting the wall. And maybe more importantly for the new models is Microsoft is telling us it now can train models in weeks instead of months. And that's something to understand. The thing that you're using every day, ChatGPT or Sonnet or Opus, all these different models, some of them take months to train. Now we're going to take weeks to train those. And just to put that in perspective, when ChatGPT 3.5 came out years ago now, that also took weeks, months to train. And I remember one of the engineers at Microsoft that was responsible for the training, for getting all the hardware in place, once reported on LinkedIn that he's now able to do ChatGPT 3.5 training in only a few minutes. So if you're a user out there just using ChatGPT or using Cursor, and you don't really know about these hardware changes, just know that B300 chips behind the scenes are going to start running your models. They're going to be faster, more efficient, and they're probably going to do things that freak you out even more. For more information, see the show notes for links. In other news, OpenAI expanded Sora video generation app to Android. So OpenAI's Sora, an AI-driven video creation app, was previously only on iOS. It launched on Android in early November 2025. Tech Media reports that it became available to Android users in the US and Canada via Invite. The Android rollout includes stricter safety filters to prevent misuse, deepfakes, and allows free users to generate short clips of up to 50 seconds from text prompts. Sam Altman has positioned Sora as a flagship consumer AI tool, and this expansion into Android puts pressure on Google, which has its own experimental AI video tool as well. For more information, go see Tech Startups Daily News or TechCrunch, and even Bloomberg. This is widely reported. Starlink had its 200th batch of satellites in SpaceX's latest launch. And as of 2025, the estimate is that Starlink has more than 12,000 satellites in orbit. Thomson Reuters Foundation notes that Starlink has expanded aggressively across Asia and Africa, and they're trying to bring internet to remote areas in countries like Bangladesh, India, Zimbabwe, and Tonga. So there's no exact number, but this is the estimate of the number of satellites that are currently aloft. And the 12,000 satellites might also include operational and prototype satellites, but we think after 200 launches, that's how many we have up there. Red Hat has introduced confirmed sovereign support for European Union customers, and this provides EU-based technical support that's staffed exclusively by citizens in EU nation-states. Now, the Wall Street Journal notes that this addresses a growing data sovereignty concern and compliance requirements for European organizations that are using open-source infrastructure. This is essentially Red Hat ensuring that sensitive support data logs config never leaves Europe, and it's a response to EU regulators' focus on local control over data and open-source supply chain integrity. And on that last topic, there's a lot of interest these days on what the EU is doing for cyber resilience or open source regulation. In fact, this will be an area of focus sometime later next week. There's lots of laws going into effect now that will have a direct impact on open source and what can and cannot be done. So that's the day's news. And just to reiterate, one of the focuses of this news is to cover technology stories for technologists. I do hope that others find it interesting. But one of the problems that we have in the coverage of technology stories is that there's usually not enough detail for the people who understand the technologies they're using. There's also another problem, and you saw it in the Nvidia story. A lot of technology users, a lot of people who practice technology, often hear an acronym, and they don't know what it means, but they don't stop and try to find out. FP4 is an example. If you're a user of GPUs, and if you purchase GPUs, you know a couple things. One, they're fantastically expensive. And two, they're full of new acronyms. There's a new acronym thrown at you every 5 minutes when you're working with generative AI or GPUs. And in this case, I tried to stop and explain what FP4 really meant. Now, to be honest, a lot of technologists are often too proud to admit that they don't know things. I am not. I know a lot, but there's also a lot that I don't know. And so what I'm trying to do in these news stories is stop and really provide the detail that technologists need to be able to talk intelligently about topics as they occur. So that's it for today. I hope you enjoy your Friday and have a great weekend.